You have probably read about corruption and dysfunction in South African universities in the last couple of years. Some of these stories are false, but some of them are true. Many of these universities are facing a number of challenges that are taking a financial, academic, and reputational toll on them. At the heart of the problem lies the vexed issue of resources. In particular, the relationship between resources and power. Who gets what, when, and how. In this special episode of the book series, I called a professor of education at Stellenbosch University and president of the Academy of Science of South Africa. His new book, Corrupted, a study of chronic dysfunction in South African universities, was published by Wits University Press. A copy of this book can be accessed on the link that is in the description panel of this video. Enjoy the show. Professor Jonathan Jansen, I'm happy to have you today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. I want us to start by doing the introductions, and I would want to give you the opportunity to just briefly talk about yourself. Tell us who you are, what's been your experience, what way you've been working, the classes you've been teaching, the research that you've been doing right before this work.
Yeah, so my name is Jonathan Jansen. I grew up in Cape Town in South Africa, and typical black kid growing up in a township, and not really having any intentions or didn't foresee the possibility of studying at university, let alone becoming a professor. And that was true for so many of my generation. But a lot of things fell into place, a lot of opportunities came my way, and when they did, I took them. And the first was the opportunity to study at university with a government bursary in those days. And then my goal was to become a biochemist or a cell biologist or one of those things with my science degree. But I had to pay off the degree back to government by doing a government job like teaching. So I went into teaching, and to my utter surprise, I absolutely enjoyed being a teacher. I enjoyed making things simple. I enjoyed seeing a frown on a kid's face turn into joy. I enjoyed sensing that I could make a huge impact on the lives of many Black South African kids at the time through this noble profession. And then opportunities came to study abroad. I was one of the first of groups of Black South Africans who were sent to study in America in order to prepare themselves for a post-apartheid South Africa, and I did that and came back and then went into university as a professor, later on a chair, a dean, a vice chancellor, and so on. And so my work has always sort of straddled two interests. The one was understanding school reform, and the other is understanding how universities work or don't work, and so on. And I've been able to do that on a comparative basis. I've just come from teaching at Harvard, a master's class on education reform, and now I'm back in South Africa a few days ago to continue my work in schools that fail. So as I said, this dual intellectual interest between school reform and university function is what gives me great joy.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I believe you are one of the people who are well positioned to write about book, given that you've taken up leadership positions in universities and you've been a professor for a very long time. I believe you are someone who is in a very good position to write this book. So, what would you say are the core ideas of your book, and what is its central argument?
Its central argument is that you cannot um, change universities in the post-apartheid period in South Africa without understanding the many, many ways in which corruption is embedded within institutional function. And the goal of the book was to make that visible. It was to show how exactly in the, the entrails of the university, how corruption actually works. So I am in many ways an empiricist. I like to nail down the reality in front of me through really good research on, for example, in this case, the micropolitics of universities. I'm not as good as sort of coming as a theoretician as much as I enjoy theory and trying to sound smart and impressive with and trying to make the empirical reality fit some pre-established theory. I like to work in the reverse. I like to get into the messiness of a dysfunctional school or of a corrupt university and then work my way backwards into saying, now, what kind of theory can one generate out of this? Or how can one adapt existing theory or melt them together or discard them entirely to understand the reality in front of us. So, so the goal of the book was to illuminate the ways in which corruption works in this case in South Africa's 26 public universities. And the reason why it's particularly important in a developing country is, of course, this resources are incredibly strained, and the more corruption you have in universities, and the more it stays in place, the less you have available for other key functions like the adequate funding of students in order for them to study, the adequate funding of infrastructure to advance, research, etc., etc. So everybody loses when corruption remains settled in place. And as I said, the purpose of the book was to uncover, the operations of corruption in order to change it and in order to give our universities a better chance of survival.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. So did you study particular case studies of particular universities?
Yeah, so as you said, I've worked inside universities as a professor, vice chancellor, a leader, but I've also come into dysfunctional universities on appointment by ministers of education to set them straight. So there is within our legislation a position of administrator, which is when a university simply cannot resurrect itself, the minister can appoint somebody to go in and try and fix it. So I've done that twice for two different universities. So the combined experience of having been an insider trying to, build strong universities and an outsider coming in trying to fix broken universities, my data, so to speak, comes from those two sets of experiences.
What do you think is the major contribution of your book to our understanding of higher education?
I don't think there's a lot of books on corruption in higher education done as empirical scholarly, research. There's some publications from, multilateral organizations like UNESCO or, some international agency. But those aren't scholarly, that's not scholarly work. That's by and large, simply consulting work, go in and document and make recommendations. So I was surprised at how little work is being done, both empirical and theoretical, on the operations of corruption in universities in general, and certainly very little on the African university in particular. And so it was for me a really great opportunity to add to that literature by showing in great empirical detail with very strong conceptual sort of contributions as to how universities, not just in Africa but all over the world, can in fact, deprive uh, uh, the people of much needed resources by diverting them for, the the needs or the greed of people who have no interest in higher education and its contribution to society. So the major findings of the book is that corruption is embedded in universities. Secondly, that it's very, very difficult to unravel because of the multiple stakeholder interests in the corruption continuing. Thirdly, that that when people on the outside, South Africans like to speak about stakeholders, when they see universities, they don't just see it as a place where my child can go and get a degree and improve the family income. They also see it as something that can be grabbed. In other words, especially during the Zuma administration, that is one of our most corrupt presidents, people started to think of the university in the same way they started to think of other public entities, not as a place of higher learning, our very elevated notion of the university, but as simply another resource which, benefits from billions in state investment every year. They see that as a place to steal, whether it is corruption in terms of the publication subsidies, or corruption in the student transport system, or corruption in the building of infrastructure like student residences. Every time money comes, there's a group of people, vultures, circling those institutions and seeing it just like the municipal office where you can steal the rent, or the state transportation system where you can, basically steal the funds for trains and buses. So the university is no exception, I discovered, when it comes to people who see these state-funded institutions as resources that can be stripped for personal gain. And that was very disturbing for me, because in many societies, you think of a university as something different, It's something on a hill. It's something you aspire to. It's something you send your children to. But when the university just becomes another resource to steal from, then you're in a very, very difficult situation, and so on. That said, I also use examples in the book of universities that have been turned around. And for that, you need very astute leadership, both at the institutional level, the university, but also within government, to work together to root out corruption. Because if you can't do that alone as a vice chancellor, you'll get killed, as indeed has been the case. Assassination attempts on at least one vice chancellor who tries to turn around in the University of Fort Hare. So the dangers are real, and that's why the police services, the university vice chancellor, the national president together have to decide on how to clean up universities. Otherwise, you're badly exposed if it's only the people who work there that act.
Who would greatly benefit if they are to get their hands on this book?
So for me as an activist, my broader target audience is the taxpaying public. Okay, these universities benefit from taxpayer money. The taxpayer needs to say, why am I giving all this money and it's going to nefarious ends, right? And so I'm hoping parents will agree to send their children to university. I'm hoping obviously government officials agree to disperse these, state funds to the institutions of higher education. I'm hoping that students read it and sort of say, maybe now I understand why there isn't enough money for me for transport, university scholarships, etc., etc. I'm hoping that the broader public would sort of say, if we lose our universities, we lose a cultural wealth. We lose a means for, social mobility. We lose something to be proud of. We lose research, that can make a difference in human lives. I often tell people, about the Hunt Rice loss and the X-ray machines and the kind of discoveries made in South African universities. But I also tell them that this was a center in the production of vaccines, for example. There's also a center in the discovery of variants during COVID. So the Omicron variant was discovered in Botswana and in South Africa. So, there's a lot to lose if we don't protect our universities as an asset for.
I'm very much grateful to have heard you on this show and to learn from you. Viewers and listeners, those of you who would want to get a copy of this book, do not forget to click the link that is in the description panel on the upload for this video. Professor Jansen, thank you so much for your time.
Great pleasure.
Wonderful.